Welcome to a deep dive into sharks and shark conservation, hosted by Jojo Cook, Jane Hutchinson, Denise Arango, and Matthew Novak, in conjunction with HCOM 340S.
Everybody, my name is Matt Novak, and I will be introducing you guys to our topic, which would be sharks. We're going to be going over a variety of issues and information, along with a really cool interview that we all were able to take part of, and we're able to discuss some issues and hear from professionals about what's going on with the sharks on Monterey Bay. Some of the things we'll go over is what is a shark and why are they important? Why are they such a big, important piece to the ocean's ecosystem? What issues the sharks are facing in their habitat? How our community is currently impacted by these issues. And we'll be going over the perception of sharks and our local issues of why should we care and why are we talking about this here. Shark sighting in Monterey Bay and sharks in SoCal to begin with. Talking about the bigger issues of climate change and the disruption of their habitat and how they're living and why they're migrating over here. And just reinforcing how serious the issue is of, what the sharks are facing and the ecosystem of the ocean. And then some key takeaways and solution to these sharks issues, ways to raise awareness around our community and make a change, and just some thoughts throughout our team. This is going to be a great podcast. We're really looking forward to discussing some of these issues with all of you and hope to raise awareness for these sharks and make sure that everybody knows what's going on. So hand this over to Jane.
We interviewed marine researcher Emily Spurgeon and discussed a variety of topics concerning sharks. We discussed her research on juvenile white sharks, what makes a shark, their important role in marine ecosystems, the biggest threats to sharks, and much more.
My name is Emily Spurgeon, and I'm a grad student and a full-time research technician at the Cal State Long Beach Shark Lab from Minnesota originally, and I went to Cal Poly to do my undergrad and really started doing a lot of scientific diving and boosting my field skills there, and then came to Cal State Long Beach in 2019 to start grad school on my research on juvenile white sharks.
Can you tell a little bit more about the Shark Lab, maybe a little bit more in depth about your current research?
Yeah, so the Shark Lab was founded in the 60s by Dr. Don Nelson, and he's kind of the pioneer of a lot of technology that researchers still use all across the globe to track animals in general, especially sharks. Chris Lowe, our current advisor, took over in 1998 from the Shark Lab. He did his PhD in Hawaii, and he was also a grad student at the Shark Lab before then. He's been here ever since, and 3 years ago in 2019, we got a $3.2 million grant from the state to study white sharks because they're so super close to the shore. They share a lot of popular beaches with people, and so the state kind of wanted us to dive into why are they at these beaches, what are they doing when they're at these beaches, to help inform lifeguards kind of what's happening, as well as to just overall the public, to boost public awareness and public safety. So that's our Shark Beach Safety Program. It's kind of what I got brought into. So my project is under that big grant and under that Shark Beach Safety to kind of help inform what are these sharks doing when they're at these really near shore beaches.
What inspired you to specifically study juvenile sharks?
I love the mystery around sharks. As you guys probably know, there's so much that we don't know about them. And I never thought that I would study white sharks because, great whites in the movies, they're so charismatic. And I never thought that I would study them. I always thought I would study smaller species of sharks, but we know surprisingly little about white sharks, like where they give birth, where they're mating, especially the juveniles. We know that they're born 4 to 5 feet long, and up to 10 feet, they can still be considered a juvenile. But we don't really know that much about the juveniles because a lot of research is really focused on the adults, and we just haven't had the funds or technology to study the babies. And so this is kind of the first time we've been able to do this at this scale. And it's really exciting because we've never had the money to do it. And even in Australia and South Africa and other places, they don't have the funding and means to do the kind of research that we're doing right now. So it's exciting to be able to be the first to kind of dive in.
Do you think that mystery kind of adds to the fear that people have of, especially if the juveniles are staying closer to shore? Is that where a lot of the fear comes from?
Oh yeah, I think so, because people have been seeing white sharks in Southern California for 10 decades, but they've never really understood that they're juveniles, and especially since people don't realize how different the juveniles are from the adults. The babies, they eat completely different things. They're in a completely different climate. They're really temperature sensitive, whereas the adults really aren't. And so there's a lot of differences. And so when people say that, oh, there's a white shark near the beach, it could be a 6 foot long baby, but people just assume it's the same characteristics and same habits as the adults, where they're here for the seals, they're going to eat the surfers, like the same kind of to fear. So that's what's really exciting. I like studying the babies because we get to kind of burst all of those fears by people saying, no, well, they're actually here eating small fish and stingrays, and they're hiding and they're super skittish. Like, we've got videos of the sharks being scared of a piece of kelp in the water. Like, they're super skittish because the bigger ones will eat the babies. And so they're staying really close to shore to kind of hide from the adults as well. So people just kind of don't realize that they're here for protection and safety as well, that they're not just here to eat the surfers. So it definitely adds to the fear, just not knowing about the juveniles.
Is that just with the white sharks, or is that most shark species in terms of the juveniles and the adults?
Yeah, I think a lot of shark species have differences in their diet as they age, and differences in where they migrate and where they live. But I don't think, because they're not as high profile as white sharks, for example, like lemon sharks, for the first 3 years of their life, they're going to hang out in a mangrove super close to shore, really shallow water. They'll grow there for like 3 to 4 years, and then they'll move offshore. The adults have completely different movement, and they eat completely different things, but people aren't really scared of, baby lemon sharks or anything because they're small. So I think white sharks being born 4 to 5 feet long and being 10 feet and still considered a baby is pretty intimidating.
How would you describe a shark? I guess like what they look like, basic anatomy, or like what makes them a shark compared to, let's say, other types of fish.
Yeah, so I would say, they're a cartilaginous fish. So I would tell people the same material that your nose and your ears are made of. The sharks have their skeleton is made up of that material rather than, calcium like ours. They have gills to breathe just like other fish, and they also have additional senses. So what makes sharks really special is that in addition to, the touch, smell, taste, sight, they also have electromagnetic reception, which is they can sense, electric pulses in the water. So if a fish is hiding in the sand, a shark can detect that. That's kind of what makes a lot of sharks special. It's hard to narrow it down because they're so different. Like, sharks can range in max size from 6 inches, up to 45 feet, and they can live as little as like a couple years to as old as 500 years. And they've been on this planet for 400 million years, and they're just a perfect example of evolution. If I say, like, picture a shark, most people think of like a reef shark style where they're all gray, really sleek fins, tall for like first dorsal fin, little second dorsal fin. So everyone kind of thinks like a reef shark when they think of a shark, like a stereotypical shark. Everyone has that one image of sharks in their head. A lot of people don't realize when I tell them that, if they see a shark laying on the bottom, like a horn shark or a swell shark or something, they see it laying on the bottom, they're like, oh, can it breathe? So a lot of people don't realize that even that's different, where some sharks have to swim to breathe and some sharks don't have to swim to breathe. It's always fun seeing what misconceptions they have about, like, oh, all sharks are the same. My favorite is telling people about the epaulet shark that can walk on land.
They're one of my favorites.
Crazy, right?
Okay, so what role do sharks play in the wild, and specifically in terms of ecosystem off the California coast?
Yeah, so sharks are, we always hear the sharks apex predators. They can control a lot of systems in the ecosystem. So if you take out sharks in ecosystem, it kind of is that trophic cascade of animals. So they're really good at population control for species, as well as like cleaning up the ocean, because they'll eat a lot of like dead carcasses and like dead things as well, like a lot of smaller sharks at least. And in Southern California, they're really important because of that same trophic cascading effect. So a lot of our white sharks especially will eat, when they're adults, marine mammals. Then those marine mammals will eat, other things that maybe might be devastating kelp forests. So the juvenile sharks, for example, they're eating a lot of squids and invertebrates and rays and stuff, which when left unchecked can also kind of, like any other system, cause a trophic cascade of events down the food chain. But I think any shark in an ecosystem is a sign of a healthy one.
Hi all, Denise here, and I'm going to hit a little bit on why are sharks important. So sharks, like many other animal populations, are rapidly declining. However, sharks are of a special importance because, as discussed in the interview, they are apex predators that keep the marine food chain balanced. Without them, this food chain could collapse, causing devastating effects not only on underwater, but on land too. Millions of people depend on seafood as one of their primary resources of food. making it crucial that marine resources and ecosystems are protected and sustainably managed. Wasteful fishing practices, climate change, misplaced fear, and shark finning are a few of the forces driving the decline in shark populations. In this next part of the interview, we will go more in depth into these issues.
All right, wonderful segue there. So that is the nature of this first question here. So what are some of the most important issues faced by sharks right now, in your professional opinion? My follow-up is, how have we seen some of these issues become relevant here in California?
Yeah, so a lot of, there's like a wide range of issues. So for a lot of species that aren't like white sharks and whatnot, obviously like bycatch is a big issue, and like other fishing for sharks, because a lot of, like, for example, we worked with Fish and Wildlife about 3 years ago, which they confiscated boxes of about 10,000 shark jaws, and all of them were claiming to be one certain species, but we ended up identifying every single one of them. And there was endangered species there and a bunch of other like juvenile, like freshly born babies there, but it was just all like the black market trade and all that kind of stuff. So the big issues is like how little money you can really get for a shark. Like fishermen don't really get that much money for a shark, and so they have to catch a lot of them to kind of make it worth it. And then like their jaw trade and teeth and fins, obviously. But I'd say like overfishing is definitely the biggest issue facing the majority of sharks. Not obviously like the deep water sharks and some other ones, but in our system, that's why in 1996, I want to say, sometime in the 90s, there was a nearshore gillnet ban that went in place for fishermen, and that protected a ton of baby white sharks. And so in addition to that, we had the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and that boosted, we're now just seeing kind of the effects of that, but that like nearshore gillnet ban, which had a lot of bycatch for our baby white sharks, ever since they stopped being able to ban or fish within 3 miles of the coastline, it's saving so many other sharks. So I'd say fishing is definitely the biggest threat for sharks.
How do these issues with sharks affect us in terms of economy, recreation, tourism, etc.? How do shark problems affect humans?
Yeah, we're really seeing that a lot, in the Indo-Pacific. So because so many sharks are being fished, now that influences ecotourism, where they might not go out and see any sharks, and that especially for other fish that might rely on sharks to keep their populations boosted, we're seeing now that these other fish species are kind of disappearing. And so whether that's directly linked with the sharks disappearing or not, the overfishing is a huge issue in our oceans, and the fish just can't bounce back without the sharks, and the fish, because of other predators that are now eating them and these other things. But yeah, it's pretty devastating both on our economy, just for being able to sell fish and being able to just have that kind of market, as well as ecotourism, because if there's no sharks and there's no things in the area, then there's no money now going into that country or that community for the shark diving.
Speaking specifically on, impacts to tourism, I know here in the Monterey Bay over this summer, we had 2 separate incidents of white sharks appearing and, clashing with humans off of very popular beach-going beaches. I believe you probably have some pretty good insight as to the how and why.
Sharks don't care about people at all. Like they either ignore them, or when they do have an interaction, it's very brief, and there's different water users. Like they get closest to swimmers. They get the farthest away from, larger objects. So like the larger the thing is, the farther away that they get, because the smaller it is, they obviously don't see it as a big of a threat. Shark bites don't really influence the economy that negatively. So while a shark bite might stop people from visiting and stop people from, coming and spending money in that town, but people that are going to go in the ocean, like surfers and paddleboarders that live there, aren't going to stop going in the ocean if there's a shark bite, essentially. Like we had one woman recently get bit down here. It wasn't fatal, it wasn't bad, it was just one of the babies kind of just like boinked her leg, just like, and then released, but people were in the water the next day.
What are things that we can do to help these issues or to raise awareness?
Raising awareness is the biggest thing that we can do. So we kind of spend our entire summers going all over Southern California just to try to educate the public on not only what animals are out there, but how to be safe in the water, because obviously these are apex predators that are very capable animals. And so always like informing people, if you do go in the water, stay in a group, how to interact with a shark. So if they do see a shark in the wild, what to do. So make eye contact with it, never turn your back to it, and just calmly swim back to shore and that kind of thing. So the more we can inform the public on both the shark behavior as well as what to do in that scenario, I think it'll kind of alleviate some of that mystery, like we were talking about before, where if they can, the more they understand them, the less that they might fear what's happening.
Tell us a bit more, like, where do you go? Who are you talking to? When were you telling?
Yeah, so we have about 3 or 4 different programs that we do. So we have our jaw programs, those jaws I mentioned earlier. We box them up and ship them all over the country to teachers, and so that they can use it. We developed a curriculum to just educate about the teeth and different morphologies of sharks. So how different sharks eat different things based on their location and their size and the shape of their teeth. So that kind of hits the first head of like, not all sharks are meant to eat people. They're not here for marine mammals. Most sharks eat small fish, other things. And so we have that program educating about their teeth and their jaws. And we also have the thing called Shark Shacks that we take to beaches. It's kind of like a pop-up tent with a bunch of stuff on the table. And that's where we bring like tangible things that people can to feel and touch, because no one really gets to touch sharks or even see them outside of like a picture, an aquarium or something. And so we'll bring like the fins, the skin, the eyeballs, the parts of the shark, just so we can teach them about like the anatomy of the shark and what they're doing when they're at these beaches, as well as we bring a lot of our technology to show people how we're tracking them. Because the more we can say people, all right, we're actively monitoring these individuals, that also might kind of relieve that stress where we know where they are, we're figuring out what they're doing, and we're working with the lifeguards. The more we can, raise awareness, we can hopefully prevent negative interactions, because I know in San Diego, a lot of the people, because they think the white sharks are eating sea lions, they kind of want the white sharks gone. And that might be promoting that poaching, where if we can go to these beaches and say, here's a stingray, this is what the sharks are eating, and this is how they're eating them, and based on the shape of their teeth and all these different things, this is what they're doing. So that's a big part of our outreach, is just like educating on like physiology, anatomy, behavior of these sharks, as well as how we track them, where they're going, or how to be safe in the water.
Well, I think we've reached just about the end here. We have one more question for you, one last nugget of wisdom we'd like to gain from you. So do you have any parting thoughts you'd like to share? Anything about what we've discussed, or maybe something we haven't touched on that you think is important for people to know about sharks or shark conservation?
The biggest thing that I always want people to remember is that obviously science is a process, and there's not one end-all be-all solution to conservation for sharks. Like, while fishing is a big part of it, temperature is also a big influence for these animals. So, climate change might be influencing where they're moving, how long they're staying at these beaches. And so it's a really complicated system, and these sharks are doing things for a lot of the same reasons that people might potentially, like they're moving because they're too cold in the winter, just like snowbirds going to Florida, or they might be being different places in the water column because they're going to risk to get a snack like I might do in the middle of the night. The sharks have very similar potential behaviors as people, and so that's kind of what I want a lot of people to take home with, where we're very complex. There's not one reason we do anything, and sharks are very similar. And so with their conservation, with the research on them, it's a huge team effort of understanding kind of where they are and where they're going. And the public, how they can help, is a lot of different ways.
Emily said it best. Science is a process. For everything we know about sharks, there's so much more we don't fully understand. But what we do understand, and what we've come to understand here through our research and our talk with Emily, is that A, sharks are awesome, ancient forces of nature still running the seas today. B, sharks are facing threats from practically all sides. And C, we really, really need sharks around to be able to understand them fully, to be able to safeguard the health of our ocean ecosystems, and to be able to figure out how to coexist comfortably with them. It's in all of our best interests to protect and preserve these primordial, badass animals.